Good evening. My name is Ron Bowie, and welcome to the Informaticist. Is that better? That's better. Okay. So, uh, today we're going to continue our RHIA review, and we're going to continue with part 2 of Domain 1 Task B. So, part 1 was mostly focused on AHIMA's data quality model, and in particular how that relates to the legal health record. Here in part 2, we're really going to dive into the legal health record and discuss its definition, its purpose, and really how quality is, or quality concerns, I should say, that might come to bear in the making and defining of your legal health record. Now, again, most of this course is going to be based on the 4th edition of the Health Information Management text, and so there's going to be some outdated information, but also since we're focusing on what will likely show up on the RHIA exam, a lot of this is going to be overly simplistic. That is, if you've ever had to make a legal health record or dealt with them or studied a few, you probably are well beyond anything that will be discussed here. And I'm hoping to keep this really short as well. So, going into it, the legal health record is a device, a definition, a strong recommendation established by AHIMA, and it's widely accepted nationwide. CMS advocates strongly that you have it. Some states will make mention of it in their laws, and in other states, when they refer to your business records or business or legal business documents, that is synonymous with your legal health record. And it's important to understand that. So the legal health record, as AHIMA has defined it, is essentially all those business records that you have decided you will provide, whether because failing to do so would be breaking the law or because you have just practically considered a good idea, but that you will provide under subpoena or other legal action such as a warrant. And the legal health record itself has no specific definition in that regard. And one of the things that they're going to, or possibly will ask you on the RHIA, is distinguishing, or they'll implicitly require you to distinguish the legal health record from, in particular, the designated record set, which has a very specific legal definition. But they'll want you to understand what the legal health record is and is not. In particular, because it is not universally defined, and because really it's about having a set of processes and documentation in place to respond to a subpoena that is from your jurisdiction, then you actually have to define the legal health record by those needs. That is based on the model of your business and how it fits within your state laws and even in case precedent around your enterprise and your activities. That is to say, when you make the legal health record, it's important that you pull in all relevant expertise. So you might be pulling in people from other departments, both legal, financial, and business advisors, legislative advisors, who can all provide sound advice on how and what you should be preparing and how you should document those preparations so that you can be safe when you submit your documents to the court. Now, in preparing the legal health record, traditionally, as described in the 4th edition, the Torah text, so traditionally for 2012, the concern was of documenting what sources would be pulled and making sure that when they're pulled, they are like all papers that need to be signed are signed, your I's are dotted, your T's are crossed, and the documents, that is the record of your activities, looks good, and then it's put together and sent to the court. Nowadays, the concern is how you do that in a hybrid or electronic system. So in the old system, the main thing that you would have are really just the instructions for pulling those records together. And this would be in something called a documentation matrix, which is basically just a table that says, in response to this query, to the subpoena, you would go to, such and such department and request all their records relevant to patient name, and then you pull out anything that meets a certain description. So you would, for instance, pull out anything printed on red paper. You would pull out anything that was or pull off anything that was actually not part of the business records, which would be things like personal conversations, photocopies of other enterprises' activities, so including photocopies of information from other facilities, a lot of continuity of care information. You would pull out things like post-it notes that might be tucked in, or even potentially handwritten notes from the patient or other people involved. Those kind of things, while they might actually be part of the designated record set and would have informed care, are actually not part of the legal business record for a facility, at least in most states, if not all. So you actually would not include those. Those are not a written record of your particular facility's business activities as far as your state is concerned. And it's important to understand that this actually will matter for even those who you've contracted with, or facilities that you work closely with but are not actually part of your enterprise. And again, how that works in detail will depend on your business's structure, its model, and also the legalities in your state. And that's all the kind of things you have to figure out. So in a completely paper system where you're going through this matrix, pulling all the correct documents, you make your copies, you submit them to the court, and you're pretty much done. They might request more, they might not. In an electronic system, the questions then become what else or what should be included. And there are things like people generating reports out of their system and just submitting all those reports, or even just providing open access to their system, or providing raw XML data, like reports that are designed for communicating to other systems, which would give you all the information that might be necessary, but also could include a lot else. So you actually need really good documentation on how you strip those, if you do. And if you're going to match more traditional, this is our business record, you should. Similarly, you wouldn't include chat logs, you wouldn't include instant messaging conversations or email messages, and so you would need to strip those. Another thing that you would need to strip is metadata, and this is very likely to show up if they talk about stripping anything on your exam. You're likely to get a conversation or a question that will require you to understand metadata is a very serious problem for facilities. They need to be very careful about removing it, and it doesn't really do you any good if you do an all electronic submission to just simply say, go here, fetch this, put it on a disk, or put it on some drive, like a thumb drive, and mail that to the court, or put it in an email file and send it to the court. So you'll find facilities will do things like make this into a text document first, and then that, like, copy and paste everything you see on that page, and then paste that into a Word document and save as a PDF file. They'll do things like that, and those steps are all designed so that someone who doesn't know what they're doing can strip away all the metadata. The reason that you want to strip away data, the reason you want to pull off any documents that are not part of your business record, the reason that you would even have red photocopy paper or red papers is, this was actually to prevent photocopies. Photocopy machines cannot scan red. But the reason you do this is ultimately to prevent discoverability. You don't want something that is seen by the court to then allow them to ask more questions and request more information. You essentially want to keep them blind to what else could exist, because if they know specific things do exist, they can then ask for those things. And metadata is a treasure trove of discoverability. So stripping it becomes a very serious concern for a facility who wants to protect themselves for the legal inquiry. And that will be your job as an HIM manager, or as an HIM. Or the other issue in here will be authentication. So when you have paper documents, you're going to be collecting signatures, making sure everything has been signed, and ideally there will be no false signatures. That is its own issue. But in a digital system, an electronic system, the idea of authentication and authenticity of what is there takes on an even bigger problem. So first, going on to this idea of the signature, that is the person who has said, Yes, this was my professional decision, which ideally, so the primary provider on that case, or the provider on that case, whether an NP, a PA, or an MD, or an OD, they are signing off at some point at the end of that chart. And everyone in an electronic system is essentially on record, and not simply that person signing off, but everyone who's acting within the system. There's some existence in the records of that system, hopefully, of their actions. This is called an audit trail. This audit trail may or may not be a reporting requirement. At the very least, signets will be, but the audit trail itself may be a reporting requirement. And if you don't have an audit trail, that is, if you have no way of knowing what is done by who and when and where, then you have a serious problem. So this is one part of authenticity. More importantly, digital signatures without audit trails lose their meaning. So there's a few ways around that. Like you can use like security keys, and signatures are actually directly tied to a key and a timestamp. So that is one solution, and it's not generally one that's done. Normally in an EHR, the act of signing is essentially clicking a checkbox and OK, and as long as you're in your account, you have now put your signet on that document. And technologically, it's not any different from any other authentication trail, but in that process, we are making you have a cognizant action. So it's important to understand that without an authentication trail, without a system of authenticating in your EHR, you really are not able to have proper signatures and proper documentation of who did what in your business record. And that's one concern. Your EHR needs to be designed to handle that. Another concern is authenticity of or veracity of the content. So you also need an audit trail of what has been done to the information. If something is changed, that needs to be a record. And you actually need to keep the old and the new version. And from what I've seen, modern EHRs and EMRs actually do this. And so you'll have every edit ever done still there. You actually cannot permanently delete anything from most modern systems, and that's good, and that's a big part of what will guarantee your validity in your legal health record, because the court actually could request everything, and if there's a change, they need to be able to see that. And if they don't know there's a change, they might not ask, but ultimately if someone asks, you need to be able to present it. The final issue for authenticity is in the creation of the record itself, that it was done correctly, that when you're creating your legal health record, proper procedures were followed. And in an electronic environment, that gets much more complex than just walking down to the office. And in fact, let's just talk about the hybrid environment, because that is the most complex. This is where you have both the paper and the electronic procedures, and you may even be creating at the end of this a hybrid record, although odds are high you're going to either digitize the paper stuff or print the digital stuff. Normally the final thing you'll present will be one of those two instead of a mix of everything. But in following your procedures, you need to have well-documented procedures that really say how, if any, changes you make to the data. So when you're stripping that metadata, there needs to be a very clear procedure so that if it so happens that the court believes anything is lost, that you have a very clear defense over why you did what you did. That, no, I followed standard procedure. So if information was lost, it is not my responsibility, and our hospital's procedures may be up for questioning, but that protects you and ultimately protects your hospital if you've done this on good legal advice and technical advice. So it's important that you have all these procedures documented, what systems you go to, who's responsible for those systems, how you then change any data or change any documents before final presentation, how you prepare them for final presentation, and just all those could be much more complex steps. And then, again, all of these need to conform to whatever your local laws are. A decent review of the legal health record can be found on pages 332 to 335 in the Latour book, so I invite you to look at that. But what I've said here pretty much covers the big concerns and what you're likely to encounter on your test. The only other thing is in maintaining the validity or convincing or not compromising the quality of your report will be concerns about the design of your data input, like how information is actually inputted. And this goes a bit back to the data quality model we talked about in the previous video. But there are electronic systems which, unlike paper systems, allow you to cut and paste. And this is much more diminished, but for your test, these things still exist. And there are also, and this still exists aplenty, electronic systems that might not actually require you to type anything, but they're not having you input kind of just the facts, very discrete and highly specific information. And instead, you might have these like pre-designed descriptions, and you're selecting from them. And the issue with all of these is that what is actually saved into the system might not be the correct professional opinion or even an exactly accurate description of what actually happened. And if your EHR is designed in such a way that people are able to cut and paste, or people are clicking these prefabricated blocks of text, or where prefabricated blocks of text are being generated out of the discrete data. So maybe the clinician is entering in this very limited bit of specific information, but then it becomes a more, quote, human readable, flowery version of a paragraph description later on. Well, if that paragraph description is misleading in any way, if those clicks of block text that are just selected and then dumped into the record, if those are not truly representative of what happened, or if your cut and pasting is not truly representative of what happened, you have a system that is fundamentally questionable before the court. And if your system is recognized as having one of these procedural flaws, your data is inherently of poor quality, and so there could be further investigation. This is a serious concern for the legal health record, and your state might have on record or in law what you need to be doing about that. Odds are high at this point, and even in the lower end states that I've looked at, they have in their departments of health, or in whoever is kind of the state side of your hospital systems or your healthcare system, they probably have some formal statements about this exact problem and tell you where you need to draw the line. So you're free to look those up. Look what it looks like for your state. You might find some interesting discussions, but those are informed by the practices in your states and the legal issues that have arisen from it. So they're really good reading. But the important thing for you to understand is for your test is that those are issues at all, and those could come up. Other than that, I think we're good. You probably won't have a lot on the legal health record, but it is important to understand what it is, especially in juxtaposition to other types of records that you might be required to report. So again, it is not a legally defined document, but it is a combination of procedures and a list of particular sources that you will choose to provide if you are ever handed a subpoena. And by following those procedures and presenting the list of sources that you have prescribed, you are then conducting your business in a prescribed way. That is, you need to meet the legal requirements, and then by submitting your own professional guidelines, you're saying we have followed our guidelines, hopefully, and therefore are ultimately safe. And then the court's not going to come down on you like a ton of bricks if they need something more, and they say, no, we need something like this. That can be worked out. You will not be assumed to be a bad actor in any way for limiting your information, as long as you have limited it by following your guidelines, and your guidelines meet the legal requirements. And I think that's it. You should be good for this. So, as always, good luck, and continue learning and continue working to make the world a better place. And yeah, best of luck to everyone. Continue studying. Okay, bye.